Well, good morning from St. Bart's in Midtown Manhattan. My name is Peter Thompson. I serve as the vicar and interim rector here. And whether you're joining us here in person on Park Avenue or online at stbarts.org, it's a joy and delight to welcome you to the forum where each week we have sacred conversations about the things that matter. And I'm joined today by my colleague, the Reverend Meredith Ward, our senior associate rector. Today we're going to hear about the important and very relevant topic of Alzheimer's and other dementias. And to welcome our guest speaker, I'm going to turn it over to Meredith.
Thank you, Peter. Welcome, everybody, and I'm delighted to welcome to St. Bart's this morning Dante Tipiani, who is a care manager at an organization called CaringKind. Some of you may be familiar with CaringKind, but if you're not, you should be, because it is an extremely important organization that provides services for both people with Alzheimer's and dementias and their caregivers. So Dante, I'm going to turn it right over to you to share some of the resources that are available.
Thank you, and good morning to everybody. I am so honored to be here today and provide this information to you all. I'm just going to talk for about maybe 30, 40 minutes, and if you have any questions, write it down or just keep it in mind, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. CaringKind. So I'm going to talk about dementia. A lot of people hear the word and there's a lot of confusion. What is dementia? What is Alzheimer's? So my hope by the end of this talk is that you will have a better understanding of about what the word dementia is. My name is Dante Tipiani. I'm one of the social workers and I'm also the senior navigator and community builder at CaringKind. And CaringKind, so if you do not know who CaringKind is, let me tell you a little bit briefly about who we are and what we do. We are one of the oldest non-for-profit organizations that provide support, education, and training to family members, those affected by dementia, and people in various stages of dementia. We are a trusted partner. We want to be your trusted partner for support, for resources, and really for guidance throughout the caregiving journey. We provide all of our services are free of charge, and we provide it in different languages. We help people who are in various stages of dementia, like Alzheimer's, and we provide different activities for them. We provide information for family members, support, education, and training, and also for professionals. And we also partner with different residential community organizations and cultural organizations. We have a helpline where you can call in and you can speak to someone, answer your questions. We have also navigation for those who have specific questions about dementia, about Alzheimer's and caregiving. And we also have different family trainings, workshops, and also one-to-one coaching, because with Alzheimer's, if anybody has experienced that before, Alzheimer's is a challenging experience, and families and people with dementia go through different challenges. Variety of challenges. I'm not going to get into every challenge, but sometimes there's physical, there's behavior, there's personality challenges, and a lot of challenges with memory, of course. And so we provide that type of training and guidance for family members. We have support groups. We have early stage programs where we meet with people in the early stage of dementia, and we provide cognitive stimulating activities. And we have social activities, so we have a variety of different programs that we offer. All of our information is on our website, so you can feel free. We have some recorded videos. We have monthly seminars. We have one of our core topics is topics like this, really to just understand dementia. There's a lot of questions about legal, financial issues as well. Understanding Medicaid, long-term care policies, but also just home care, that subject about that type of extra support that families often don't think about, that is very important as they go through their journey. And I have a QR code here. If anybody's, those folks that are online, you could go to the website, you could access the QR, and we have a lot of information there. Okay, so I'm not gonna talk that much about it. I do a baseball reminiscence. So for those people who are in the earlier, maybe middle stages, more early later on, who enjoy baseball, who have enjoyed baseball, we do have a baseball reminiscence group, and we meet in person or on Zoom. So all of these slides are going to be provided if anybody's interested in having the slides. We're going to, like I said before, we're going to leave some questions for the end, and this is for folks that are online. If you have any questions, just put it in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that. If you need to raise your hand, etc., at the end. But let's jump into understanding dementia, okay? And I'm just going to give an overview about what I'm going to talk about the next 30 minutes. What is dementia? What is Alzheimer's? And the different types of dementia, okay? Because that's the confusion oftentimes. Dementia, Alzheimer's. What do they mean? And there are different types of dementia, like Lewy body dementia, et cetera. But how that impacts our brain, what are the signs and the symptoms of this disease? What's the difference between diagnosis and how we can live well with cognitive changes? And what's the difference between the different diseases? So here is an umbrella. A lot of people have seen this umbrella, maybe in different colors, but the umbrella is used to describe the word dementia. And if you think about it, it's a general term that describes symptoms. I always often think about the word dementia. It is not the disease, it is describing symptoms. So it's describing memory loss, changes in personality, changes in behavior, and every person's dementia is different. So once someone hears the word dementia, oftentimes the second question should be, what type of dementia? What type? Because there are a variety of types. Think about this example. A lot of people categorize different fruits. So what's your favorite fruit? So it could be apple, pear, for example. What type of dementia? So it can be Alzheimer's, it could be Lewy body, it could be frontotemporal dementia, it could be Parkinson's type of dementia. So it's a variety of types of dementia, or it could be a mixed dementia as well. What happens to our brain? So someone is having memory problems, what is going on? The changes. There's a change that caused a decline in one of these areas. Okay, so we talk about memory, talk about short-term memory, long-term memory, executive function, and I'm going to talk a lot about executive function, visual spatial functions also. All of these changes that are happening to a person, sometimes not all at the same time, or sometimes at the same time. Language problems, processing information, muscle movement, sensory functions. So these are all the changes. Now the brain is complex. The brain is very, very complex, which is why there is not a cure for this disease, at least right now. Right now there is not a cure. There's medications that help slow the progression of the disease, but there's not a cure. And as you see an image here, it's complex. And if you do a deeper dive into the brain, you see different areas that control different functions. Brief information about anatomy. So if you think about it, you think about what area of the brain controls things, controls language, controls who we are, controls vision, smell, movement, where the memory is stored. Like I mentioned in the beginning, short-term memory, long-term memory. Alzheimer's often affects the short-term memory first, which is why there's a lot of forgetfulness, a lot of repetition. After that, then after moderate or later stage, then it goes into the long-term memory. But it often starts in the short-term memory. Different types of dementia. So this is just a scan of the brain. And you think about, this is where the disease is being affected when you think about Alzheimer's. And you think about frontotemporal dementia. Now, I'll talk more about each of them, but it affects different areas of the brain. So that's why there are different symptoms and people manifest behavior and changes differently. Frontotemporal, it affects here, this front part, which is usually the area where we store language, where we store our behavior. And short-term memory is affected in different ways, in different areas. And so the brain's neurons, we have millions and millions of neurons, networks, and they talk to each other, they communicate. And as they communicate, they start building these bonds with each other. And that's how we become who we are. But when there is a traffic of a lot of information, then you know, it's complex. So you think about a highway and how traffic can flow. And what happens when there's a disruption, right? So when there's a disruption, everything gets tangled up and gets mixed up. And we are unable, the person who has this condition is unable to process information because it's so tangled. And that word tangled and plaques is one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's, the tangles that happen in our brain. And it destroys the cell. So there's this protein called beta amyloid. And this protein sticks to the cells, to these neurons that we have, and it pretty much breaks that bond, kills the cell. And we cannot regenerate that cell, and that's where information is lost. That's where the memory is lost. And slowly it starts spreading, which is why there are different stages of dementia. And these are another examples of the plaques and the tangles. The plaques and the tangles are the hallmark of Alzheimer's, specifically Alzheimer's. Why I mentioned that so much is because 60 to 80% of all of the dementias are of the Alzheimer's type, okay? So that's a high number compared to the more than 100 types of dementias that are there, which is why it's so important. Like I said in the beginning, if you don't remember anything today, just remember dementia is a term that describes symptoms, and then what type, because there's a variety of types of dementias. But when we talk about Alzheimer's, we talk about these changes and what doctors and scientists are able to now really understand why it's called Alzheimer's, because of these plaques and tangles that stick to the neurons and kill the neurons. I'm gonna play a short video, and it's gonna really help us understand what changes happen in the brain. Do we have volume? Sorry. Okay. Well, this is pretty much just showing you in a picture form of the way, what happens to the brain and these cells. And what happens when this disease attacks these cells? It kills it. And these develop into what they call plaques, dark areas in the neurons. And when the doctor orders a scan of the brain, you're able to see these dark areas. And they've gotten to a point where they've named these proteins. These proteins are called beta amyloid, protein that sticks. There's another one that's called a tau protein, and it sticks to these cells, and it pretty much kills the cells. It breaks that connection. Okay, so I'm just gonna, I'll move on. So now I'm gonna jump into how the memory works. Okay, so memory and languages change. We know that's the hallmark of Alzheimer's and several other dementias. Now this is where we focus more on the short-term memory, long-term memory, semantic memory. It's like how our memory works. Think about how our memory works. So we talk about short-term, think about what you've done last month, who you went out to dinner, what you ate, short-term memory. But then you go into long-term memory, and long-term memory are remote, old episodes. Who was your best friend when you were in grammar school? Who was your favorite teacher? What was your best subject? Think about long-term memory, which is why when we talk about with dementia of the Alzheimer's type, there's a lot of challenges that families go through because some people say, I'm not home, common challenge, or where's my mom? When the person passed away. So they're thinking about long-term memories. We also have somatic memories, facts, things that we learn, and then procedural and working memories. So with procedural memory we're on autopilot sometimes. So sometimes I've done this talk so many times that I sometimes don't even need to look at my notes here because I'm on autopilot. And you think about brushing your teeth. A lot of people think about brushing teeth. There's so many steps that someone needs to do to brush their teeth. But someone with dementia, that's a challenge. You think about how many steps you need to get up, grab the toothbrush, grab the toothpaste, put it on, turn the water on, brush, put some brush on top, brush on the bottom, brush on, so there is a variety of steps. And we are on autopilot with some of the things. And working memory, which the information holding the executive functions versus the memory. Executive functions. Language is something that changes as well. And when I talk about the language is, you may be talking to someone, but they don't understand what you're saying. Or you're explaining something, and they catch one word of that explanation. Good example is when you ask somebody who has Alzheimer's, ask them to do something, to perform a task. Go to the kitchen, grab a cup of water, and bring it back. So they might just hear in their brain, kitchen. Okay, I'll go to the kitchen. Get to the kitchen, you forget why you went to the kitchen. Or you go to the kitchen and you bring something different. So those are the type of challenges that change over time. That type of information, that's on the tip of my tongue. Those changes that start happening. Now, a lot of people think about or are concerned. I have problems with my memory because I'm forgetting things. It's normal. So there's a big difference between forgetting where your keys are, forgetting where your glasses, and they're right here on top of your head, or forgetting where your purse or cellular is. That's okay. That's normal. Versus a dementia where you have your keys and you're confused of what to do with your keys, or what these glasses are for, or you look at your glasses and what is the name of this. So those are red flags that happen. A lot of people are confused sometimes, what is aging versus normal aging versus a dementia, and the changes. So a deeper dive about executive function. So think about executive function as a higher level of cognitive skills. A CEO, for example, has a lot of different demands. So executive function is a higher level of thing. And this is what is affected, the changes with dementia. Some examples about the different types, 2 types of executive function, organization and regulation. And so with organization, we gather information, okay? So this is the attention, the planning, the sequence, what I said before about brushing your teeth, sequencing, organizing your thoughts. Regulation involves a little bit more about not only the emotional regulation, but also monitoring the internal and external stimuli, and specifically more moral reasoning and decision making. So what's the right thing to do? The changes when someone has this condition, this is what changes with the executive functions. Difficult organizing things. Inability to multitask. Go to the kitchen, bring me a glass of water and a towel. Multitasking. Difficult in planning and initiating conversations, which is sometimes there's a lot of withdrawal or isolation. Trouble planning for the future. What am I going to do tomorrow? What am I going to do next week? Where am I going to go on vacation, etc. So difficult planning for the future. Difficult processing, storing, and retrieving the information that we need. So think of our brain. Our brain is, from when we were young, we learn, we absorb, we're a computer learning, and we store that information in the brain. And then when we need that information, we retrieve it. And there's mood swings, a lot of mood swings and changes. Lack of concern for others also can happen. Loss of interest in doing things. Often another red flag is for those who maybe you don't see often. Person who's always been here, and from one moment to another, suddenly they're not here no more. Or maybe they come less. So that can be another red flag of what's going on. Social inappropriateness. Inability to learn from consequences. Difficult with abstract thinking. And unaware or denial. I've worked in geriatric psychiatry, and oftentimes there's a huge denial, even when the person comes to clinic who has problems with memory, and they say, I do not have no problems. I do not have no problems, when they need someone to maybe help them dress with certain activities of daily living. But there's this denial, unawareness. What else changes? And this is for those who drive. Visual spatial changes. So you have to be more aware of processing the speed, processing changes that happen when you drive. And balance. Balance is a big one, because there are changes in physical ability, in coordination. Again, certain things that we do on autopilot, tie your shoes. But when there's these changes, then think about tying your shoes. There's steps. There's steps in doing that. Visual spatial changes. If anybody here has ever heard of a mini mental status exam, which oftentimes is pretty much 30 questions. Doctors ask this. One of them are always, remember 3 words, recall. Apple, penny, table, for example. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that, but apple, penny, table, they mix up words. But the point is to remember these words. To draw a clock is another indication, another screen to see where the person is at. Because visual spatial asks someone to draw a clock. That you think about, okay, and you give them the circle and point the clock to a certain time. And these are examples of changes from the beginning of this disease to a moderate stage to a more advanced stage where there is this confusion. And visually, spatially thinking, you can't really process that information and put the clock, the arrows, and the numbers, and they start piling up the numbers here. There's also changes physically. So some physical changes, this is processing the information, but also physical changes. There's incontinence. There's problems swallowing. I don't get into a lot of details about the later stage because that could be a whole other conversation. But in the later stage, moderate to later stage, a lot of people think, well, how do people die from this disease? How do they die? And one way they die is because they forget how to swallow. And that is one of the decisions that we need to think about personally, or the person or family, of what to do when the person is no longer able to eat or swallow or drink. Then there's questions about nutrition and hydration and feeding tubes, etc. So those are important conversations to have very, very early, even when someone is diagnosed or even before. The types of dementia. So like I said in the beginning, 60 to 80% of the dementias are of the Alzheimer's type. Now we've learned about others. Vascular dementia is the second most common type, vascular dementia. And we have Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal dementia, Parkinson's, a range of other types. But to talk a little bit more about vascular dementia, before I go into vascular, let me just tell you a few things about Alzheimer's. So like I said, the most common type, almost 60 to 80% of the dementias are of this type, but there are these plaques and tangles in the brain. And that's an example of the normal brain and the Alzheimer's brain. And you can notice how it starts shrinking. Memory problems generally is the first signs, also impacts word, visual, reasoning. But here's the second most common type, which is the vascular type. It results from injury to blood vessels that supply the brain. So this is pretty much when someone has a stroke. When someone has a stroke, they have a vascular accident. And this is called a vascular dementia. And the symptoms are very, very sudden. And they go stepwise. So you think about a stepwise progression. Someone has a stroke, they go down, they deteriorate a little bit. Maybe they get physical therapy, occupational therapy, they kind of get a little bit more to where they were at. But then they may have another stroke, and so it starts going down, deteriorating. And symptoms change over time. And people can improve with this type of dementia. And some doctors even say that half of these dementias are preventable. Preventable, because what happens when someone has a stroke? Why do they have a stroke? Correlating with hypertension, with cholesterol, with sugar, diabetes, etc., heart problems. So that is something that can be prevented. Frontotemporal. So frontotemporal came in to highlight with more, like in public, with Bruce Willis. So if anybody has heard of Bruce Willis, he has this type of dementia. Frontotemporal dementia is caused by damages to the nerve cells in the temporal part of the lobe. It's very hard to diagnose because there's a lot of confusion with symptoms. But this specific condition usually happens before someone is 60 years old. So when they are, it starts with aphasia, problems talking, and then it leads to behavior problems, and then it goes into memory problems, which is different than Alzheimer's, which often starts with the memory. Lewy body dementia. Lewy body dementia. How many people here have heard of Lewy body dementia? Okay. So a Lewy body dementia, again, an actor, Robin Williams, he had Lewy body dementia. So Lewy body dementia, it again affects different changes, these chemicals in the brain, and early symptoms often, but not all the times, are similar to other dementias like Alzheimer's. Again, like frontotemporal, usually in the 50s. When someone's in their 50s is when they start showing the signs. And there's a lot of changes, specifically with Parkinsonian changes, this rigidness, tremors, and hallucinations. So one of the hallmarks of Lewy body dementia is hallucinations and tremors, and hallucinations of seeing insects and seeing animals or seeing people. Sometimes it's scary and sometimes it's not. So it depends on the person. Sleep disorder, mood changes, several severe problems with Parkinson's types. So it's like with incontinence and with smell. Extreme sensitive to antipsychotic medications. So with antipsychotic medication, these drugs are used to control symptoms, specifically sometimes hallucinations or behavior problems. But with this type of dementia, they're very sensitive, which is different, again, from Alzheimer's dementia. Other related dementias, so there's a variety of other dementias. And you can ask Dr. Google, there are over 100 types. Not so, some of them are very rare. Oftentimes I'm asked, what are other types of Alzheimer's? So there are two types also of Alzheimer's disease. Those that are early onset, which happens when someone is in their 30s and 40s, and those that are later onset. So what is the difference? What makes the difference? And understanding how people can live with this disease. Each of these stages can range in the early, can be anywhere from 3 to 5 years. Moderate stage can be another, maybe 5 years, even 7 years. And then later stage can also be. So you're talking about a good maybe 15 years with living with this disease versus the mentality that I'm dying from this disease. These are quotes. These are just some quotes of people who've had this condition. And Richard, who passed away from cancer, quoted, "I'm not dying from a disease, I'm living with a chronic cognitive disability. So this change also, and you even think about the changes with the notion about applying for Medicaid, which is a whole different topic. There's a disability under that insurance that covers help and support for people with dementia. And also Kate, who is a policy writer. It is clear we need to move from the medical model of care to one that is based on social and disability pathway of support and care, which is a key issue in changing this, is recognizing the symptoms of dementia as disabilities. The symptoms caused by dementias are cognitive disabilities. And focusing on the strengths of others and the strengths of people who have dementia. So what can we do? What can we do? There's no cure for this disease. What can we do? We can choose to be on medication or not medication, but what can we do? We can stay connected. Find fun and interesting things to do and stay engaged. exercise the brain, stimulate the brain, challenge the brain, limit stress. That's hard to do, but as if we put something in our lives, we can manage it. We all have stress in our lives, but we need to manage that stress. Eat and drink healthy. And that's a correlation with vascular dementia. Sleep. Sleep is so important, because sleep, we regenerate ourselves. We if you think of, in the video, there was this part where when we sleep, our brain kind of recycles everything that we have, all the, you want to call it the trash that we have, these proteins that stick. When we sleep, it helps take it out. And people who don't sleep are not, they start accumulating these plaques. So sleeping is also a good way to be well. Be physically active. Be physically active and keep your spirits up. That's a big one. Positivity. There's a study out there, there's various studies called the Blue Zone. Different areas in the world where people live more than 100 without dementia. And scientists say, well, why do people live more than 100 years old? Well, one aspect is not only social engagement, eating right, being physical active, but also being positive, positivity. And different strategies that we can add in our lives. So safeguards, minimizing stress, visual aids, technology. There's technology out there, and use the technology. So if someone does have Alzheimer's, there's a lot of emerging technology approaches that can help. Develop routines. When we get to a point where we change roles in our lives and we're not working, for example, we're not taking care of something, you have a lot of time in your hands. So develop a routine, something to do, and keep that routine. And keep it simple. Keep it simple. It shouldn't be so complicated, especially with people with dementia. Keep things simple. Why have such a complex day? Keep everything simple. And keep a sense of humor. You wouldn't know how much a sense of humor goes and plays when someone has dementia and they are acting out, what they call acting out, because there's changes and they're unable to really express themselves, their needs. So keep a sense of humor, plan ahead. And planning ahead, I mean, do you have a healthcare proxy? Do you have a power of attorney? Not only maybe if dementia is affected in your life, but if not, it's very important to talk to someone you trust to make a decision for you in case we are not around, we are unable to do this. And communicating your needs. Connect, make connections, make new friends, keep those strong friendships that bond together. And there are a lot of meaningful activities in New York, everywhere. So I really encourage just to get out there and do things, and whether it's with family or meeting new people. So we are have some time now. Before I finish, I just want to just let you know that, again, we have our helpline number. We have our website. You can access some recorded videos. Every month we have different topics on caregiving and dementia, and you could find that online. So would love to answer any specific questions. Thank you.
So thank you, Dante. That was amazing. Peter, I think, is going to be receiving questions.
Yes, so
Is
if
that
you're
right?
online, you can type your questions if you haven't yet into the chat or into the comments on Facebook. If you're joining us here in person, just raise your hand. Sally has question cards she'll bring around and bring up to me. One question has already been submitted, and Dante, I don't know if you want to take this one, or maybe Meredith should take this one, or both of you. Okay. There was a question around our theology, and what kind of hope we can have as Christians if we have dementia or if we're caring for someone who does. So again, either or both.
You could start.
It's a really great question. I mean, I think it goes to, for those caring for people with dementia, we care for the least of these, and that includes everyone. And it is an expression of love, and I think I have seen in my own personal experience how caring for someone with dementia or Alzheimer's can be an extraordinarily rich and deep expression of love between two people. I can't speak to having dementia myself, but I would say, like, as in any circumstance in life, we trust God's provision for us. So that would be my theology about it.
Yeah, I also think that people who are caring for someone, love is very important. Faith is extremely important as well. But I also think that people often get to a point where they're so isolated because your world shrinks, and certain people are, either whether family or friends are not there in the sense that maybe they don't want to be more involved as you feel. So there's this sense of, I can do this by myself, taking care of the person. So it's important to really reach out for help, whether it's somebody in friends or family or organizations, and just say, I just need that extra support, whether it's just having a conversation on the phone, or if it's a friend or family, can we just go out, have a cup of coffee, or can we just talk?
I'm sure you've seen this many times, Dante, but someone wonders if you have a parent who you think may be exhibiting early signs of dementia, what are ways in which you can deal with that situation, and how do you care for yourself as you're navigating this touchy topic?
That's very, very important. So I've been a social worker for about 25 years, and I started working in geriatrics. So I've been a geriatric social worker specifically, and I started working in research and in education, and then I went to clinical social work. And in clinical, I started working in a memory evaluation clinic. So this was about maybe 12 to 15 years ago. And then my dad showed side symptoms, and all the red flags started coming up. So I brought him in, had an evaluation, family evaluation, scan of the brain, a neuropsychological evaluation, just to rule out a lot of things. Because it could be something as easy as vitamin deficiency or depression, or a brain tumor, urinary tract infection. So there's a lot of reasons why changes happen in the brain. And I had him evaluated, and it turned out that he had dementia. And started him on medication. And he lived with me for about 5 years. So I was working and managing and juggling all of those areas. And it's challenging, because then you have to take care of yourself. Because I've seen it where wives are so dedicated to their husband that they die before the person. So it's very, very important to take care of yourself in whether it's a support group, whether it's asking for help, whether it's taking some time for yourself. There's what we call respite. There's a specific amount of respite we should have in each stage. So for example, in the beginning, you should at least be away 2 hours, ideally every day for someone. And as they get to the moderate stage, they say, okay, well, maybe a day, take a day here, at least once a week. And as it gets more advanced, suggested to take at least a weekend just for yourself. Now, there's a lot of guilt around, I'm gonna leave and the person's gonna be alone. But that's why you have to have a team, and it's a team approach.
Any tips on starting the conversation with a loved one? If you're concerned, what should you do first?
So when starting the conversation, I, as a social worker, tried to do that with my family, and it didn't work. It didn't work at all. So I knew who was my team, and understanding who your team is, so that you could be able to do this job better. Because if something happens to you, then what's going to happen to the person with dementia?
All right, I'll try to fit 2 more questions in and then hand it over to Meredith. We're running out of time. You spoke about framing symptoms as disabilities. Can you speak a little more about why that's important?
Yeah, because one part is policy. One part is policy with insurance and the way the healthcare system looks at dementia, and is a disability. At least under Medicaid, is a disability. Now, insurance doesn't, Medicare doesn't cover home care, that type of support. Medicaid does. Now, a lot of people don't have Medicaid. A lot of people they feel that they do not qualify for Medicaid. So there's been changes around that with a spend down, with an income pool trust, different types of ways to apply for that. So this is the disability world in policy. But also in helping other people understand that having dementia is not a normal process of aging, is a disability. Not everybody who is 65 years and over will have a disability, will have a dementia. Yes, the risks are a little higher as we age, but that does not mean you're going to have dementia. And those who do have it, that 28% or 30% have a disability. So,
okay. And finally, someone wonders if you can speak more about the cultural activities that CaringKind offers. What kind of enrichment opportunities do you give to the community?
Yeah. So, well, one is the cognitive. It was a program called Cognitive Stimulation, and it's an evidence-based program where we meet together with a group of people in the early stage, and we just have conversations on specific topics and principles on memory, from reminiscence to having conversation about childhood or who you are, just sharing your opinions, not facts. We have music therapy. There's been a lot of research with music, because you think about it, you put music on, you start listening to it, especially if it's music that you grew up with, that stimulates the brain, that stimulates those neurons, and it helps them build that stronger bond. So there's music therapy. We have musicians that come into CaringKind, and we're close to you guys here on 41st Street and Lex. And people with dementia and their families get up and dance or sing along. We have a writers group where people with dementia come and write their experience, how they feel having dementia. And then we have an audience, and they come and they present this letter to their friends and family. That's called To Whom I May Concern. And we also have, like I said before, a baseball reminiscence group. So we partner with a lot of different community organizations to provide social activities, just an extra activity that someone could include in their calendar. And it's free.
Excellent. So we're almost out of time. Meredith, do you want to end with anything?
Just quickly to say, Dante has very generously agreed to share his slides with us. So if you would like a copy of this presentation, just email me, mward@stbarts.org, and I will send you a PDF version of his slides. And last of all, the way Dante and I got together is that we have started a support group here at St. Bart's for people who are caring for people with Alzheimer's and dementia. We had our first meeting 2 weeks ago. We have our next meeting on October 22nd. It meets on Zoom, and it's more information about that is on the website. But if you would like to learn more about that, you can also email me as well. We are partnering with CaringKind in offering some of the resources that CaringKind offers, and we have our own group here as well as groups at CaringKind. So I hope you will feel free to join that if that is something that would be of interest.
Please join me in thanking Meredith and Dante.
And lastly, I'll be here if anybody wants to talk individually, and I have some free giveaways here if anybody would like, and information about Alzheimer's. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you both. Thank you all. Please do stick around and join us for worship, whether in person or online at 11 a.m. And next week, our own Alex Johnston will be here to talk about philanthropy. So see you then.